So the first thing I'm going to ask you, Tom, is what are you at?
Shagall. Shagall. I'm up to nothing. I'm sitting at my desk right now.
Okay.
Printing off stuff for the show.
When we have people like yourself on, we go talk about their career. So let's go way back to your Mondays, the Memorial University days. That's where you got your first taste of radio. You were programming folk music for the radio station. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So tell us how that came to be.
Well, my brother was on CHMR, the campus station there, and he had a great show called the Saturday Afternoon Morning Show, which was a show for people who, like I said, stayed up a little bit late on Friday night, and they needed something to wake up with, and it was just really good. And he was doing the morning for a while, the morning news, and when I listened to him, I loved radio. I loved that he was able to do that. And I was that guy who read the announcements, asked to read the announcements in high school. So I kind of I don't know. There was something kind of calling me. And when I got to university, when I got to MUN, I asked if I could do a show about folk music, and I did this show called Do-Si Don't, where we played country music and a lot of bluegrass music and a lot of Irish folk music, and it was incredible, and I'm a big supporter of the station. Like, the idea that you can just go in there and they'll let you do a radio show with very little experience is really liberating.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely worked out for you, and I'm just trying to remember, was folklore your major or your minor?
My major, I did a major in folklore. That incredibly, only because I wanted a job. I wanted to make sure I was employable.
Yeah,
I decided to go for folklore as my major.
Of course, you just mentioned about MUN allowing you to come into the radio with like very little experience, but that really worked for your benefit because at 21 you joined CBC to host the national folk music program Deep Roots. You were just a young guy. You were actually the youngest host since Peter Jennings. Were you nervous?
Yes, I was really, really nervous. I remember going to the station, and my mom dropped me off, and I probably had a panic attack. Just didn't really know what a panic attack was then, but just crazy anxiety. I had created this playlist of records on iTunes, and I had written a little bit about each one. I was so bad. I think I was probably okay for my experience level, but I mean, I'd love to hear it at some point, but I got a feeling it wasn't great. But I ended up meeting a guy at a balloting session, like a song session at the Crow's Nest in St. John's, and he was a producer for CBC National, and he was in charge of doing the holiday programs. And before that, I had been speaking to a producer named Francesca Swan, who was a great CBC producer, who was looking around for musicians if they wanted to do shows. And my brother-in-law, Dwayne Andrews, is a great musician, great guitarist from Newfoundland, and he had been asked, and he said no, but my brother-in-law is super into radio. And then, when this guy, I think his name was Havoc Franklin, I talked to him at the bar, and he said, do you want to do, how about a little Easter show? Play some folk music. And he found the space, and people really liked it. And then, next thing you know, they're calling me to to turn the show into Deep Roots.
Nice. So I'm guessing during the first stage, you mentioned that you were kind of nervous. What do you think, if you got the tape back, do you think there was a lot of ums and ahs and a lot of deep breaths and pauses?
No, I think it would be the opposite of that. I think it would have been like reading. Like, the thing about doing these kind of shows is, you want to sound as natural as you can. And I think you would have heard me go, the song was written in 1834 originally, then recorded again in 1915, then recorded again in 1928 by the esteemed group. I probably spoke in a way that no one ever actually speaks. You hear people on the radio and reading, they say things that no one actually ever says in real life. You'll hear people say, Brian Tobin is a podcaster who lives in Ottawa. Tobin told me the other day that he blah blah blah. But when was the last time you were in a bar and someone said to you, I was talking to Jerry Connors here the other day. Connors was telling me he's going to the bar tomorrow. So I probably just did a lot of that really super scripted radio stuff.
Now, in 2011, 3 years later, you're the host of Radio 2 Morning. Tell us how you got this gig, and did you have to adjust your style?
I was the Deep Roots host for 3 years, I guess, and I got contacted by my boss at the CBC, a guy named Mark Steinmetz, who's still my boss. The previous host had left, the previous host, a guy named Bob Mackwitz, had left the show. And he said, are you interested in auditioning for it? Because I had been doing some guest hosting. Like, I had been going up to Toronto for a week here and there to guest hosting the Radio 2 Drive show, because my friend Michelle Parisi put me on there one time, so they put me on Drive. They put me on the morning show. I think they saw something. I might have had something. And, they brought me in. The real style adjustment was probably a positive one. Like, I had to go from being super scripted, again, like reading, to trying to feel like you're conversing with someone. So I worked really hard with another person here, one of my senior producers. We sat down, and she's really brilliant, and we sat down and I would read something that I had written, and she would say, just put the paper down and just talk to me. Tell me how you would say that if you were talking in a bar, if you were talking at a show or something like that. So the real change was just how I wanted to make sure I only spoke to one person at a time. That, and up to that point, my entire life, mainly I was only kind of a radio host up until then. I was also as much, if not more, of a professional musician. I had to escape the idea that I just knew more about folk music, and I had to talk about other genres of music as well.
Okay, yeah. It's definitely interesting because, I notice when you go from a different platform, or if you're doing a different show, sometimes people like the same old same, and then some people like to make that adjustment, not to totally change your style, but to just try to adjust to what they're trying to offer.
I think you want to make going to the morning show made me think about what are people doing while they listen to the show, and that show wasn't podcasted, so it was people were doing one thing. They were getting ready for work, or they were going home from work. They were getting breakfast, they were getting their kids ready, they were making coffee. Or I really liked the people who were coming home from who were bakers who were already at work, people who were working night shift, right? But no one was listening to that morning show with 100% of their attention. They weren't. Deep Roots was a thing that if you were into folk music, you would sit down and listen to.
You're a year into your tenure as a Q host. Congrats on that. What's it been like, and what are some of the challenges?
It's been the most fulfilling work I've ever done in my life. I wake up every morning feeling so lucky. I wake up every morning feeling so privileged that I get to do this. It's great. I find I love every second of it. The challenges, there's a lot of them. But the one that sticks out to me is the morning show was me and one other person. The Radio 2 morning show was me and a producer named Lauren Hancock from Halifax, Nova Scotia, two East Coasters. And she's from Fall River. But we spent a lot of time making that show, just the two of us, and we were just kind of accountable to one another, right? On this show, we got about 13, 14, 15 people, right? Writing and researching and booking guests and producing. We do 4 or 5 or 6 interviews a day, right? We have a big team, and they're really brilliant. A lot of them, they come from different backgrounds, and almost every different way. And professionally, they come from different backgrounds. Some of them were in news, some of them were in current affairs, some of them are brand new to radio. Some of them, were in print. Some of them have been at the CBC for a million years. Some of them come from the arts. Some of them don't. I think the challenge for me is that, the idea that I'm accountable to someone else other than myself, on the morning show, I was accountable to me and to the listener. And on this show, I'm accountable to me and to the listener, and I want to do right by the really incredible staff that I have here. So it's nice. It's a great help to have them with you. But also, it's daunting because you want to do right by them. And challenge, to be honest, it's a new set of skills for me, it's like learning a new instrument. So, I think when I picked it up, when I started the show, I was better than just playing Smoke on the Water on the guitar, but I hadn't quite figured out the Crazy Train solo yet. And, I'm trying to figure out how to tap here on the Q show.
Everyone kind of has their own, interesting host. I think you're the third host now besides Gomeshi and Chad. What kind of style do you bring compared to those two? Because some people really like Gomeshi's interview styles. Some people like Chad for his kind of musical background. So what is it that you think is your strongest asset?
First off, I want to say that I don't think there's anything to like about Gomeshi. But finally, I think that in terms of what I brought to the table. I also can, I'm a performer. I can talk to people in a way that they understand. I think Shad was a great interview as well. I think that, like, if you're able to talk to people on their level, if you're able to talk to them not as fans or not as critics, and just talk to them as humans, you're going to get something good out of people. And I think what we've been able to do successfully here is try to have more human, story-based conversations with people. Try to kind of demystify the idea of an artist, demystify the idea of you often hear people say, like, oh, he was a god of the guitar, or she was an icon of the guitar, something like that. And they're just people. They have favorite chocolate bars, is how I like to think about it, and you want to get the favorite chocolate bars from them.
Okay, and speaking of chocolate bars, in a different way of rephrasing this question, and hopefully it comes across the right way, who are some of your favorite chocolate bars to interview?
Who are some of my favorite interviewers, or what?
Yeah, for sure.
So subjects or interviewers?
Subjects and interviewers, either one.
I really enjoyed having Katie Lang on the show. I loved talking to Katie Lang. I loved having Sonny Rollins on the show. I really enjoyed that. I love whenever Jay Baruchel has shown up a few times, and he's always kind of wacky and funny and go way off topic, and I really like talking to him. I like anyone who comes in with a story. I like anyone who's honest. I like anyone who's not playing a character when they sit down. And most of the people who sit down in front of me are pretty real people and are willing to be real people. Do
you have any kind of interesting or funny stories to share, like maybe a time that you were a bit late or something that happened that shouldn't have happened on the show?
That's a good question. Anything like that? What's something that's something that happened like that? Katie Lang told me in the interview that she doesn't like. She told me that it's really painful. She told me that the interview she was doing with me was super painful. She was like, I hate doing this. And I think there's a tendency to go like, what do you mean you hate doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
But I was like, man, I know. I hated doing it too. Like, when I was on the road, having to do press was time I wasn't practicing, or time I wasn't sleeping, or time I wasn't, relaxing. I understand that it's kind of an artificial conversation. You know that, like the way we can be as easygoing as we want on the line, but like, it's an artificial way of talking to someone. Once I just said that to her. I said, like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get that. I do, though, think there's value in all these incredibly brave things that she's done. Talking about coming out to her mom, talking about being scared of releasing records, talking about embracing singing. Very brave things, and I think people's lives have been changed because of the decisions that she made. That she made decisions that other people have made their own decisions based on. That was a really interesting way, because in the moment I felt like she was kind of admitting that she didn't want to be there. And then once we acknowledged that it's not a really natural thing to do, we ended up going somewhere really great.
I gotta ask this just from a broadcasting point, or as a host myself, because sometimes you do get the awkward interviews. I had one with Chris Pronger before where I felt like he was gonna punch me in the face. It was interesting.
What happened?
So I remember we were doing this story. We were doing something about him and the Peterborough Petes, and I asked him, who is the most difficult player you ever played against, something along those lines. And he kind of answered me back of saying, I'm the best player ever, or like, I've never had anyone difficult to play against. Now, being a Steve Yzerman fan, and we were in Peterborough, I kind of took that a little bit to heart. So I was like, really? Not even Steve Yzerman? And I said, and he just kind of nodded me off. I was like, don't you remember the time you tried to check him and you busted your knee? And then he kind of got a little bit mad, and he was like, okay, your next question better be a good one. And I was like, oh no. The interview went from, hey, we're honoring Chris Pronger, to, I'm going to really punch this kid out because he just asked me about something that I didn't want to talk about.
Did you learn anything from that?
In a way I did. I guess I kind of chose, like, don't be a little bit too biased, because at that point I was really into Yzerman, and I kind of took it to heart, but at the same time I wouldn't take it back, because I feel like sometimes with an interview you have to not be such more like of a fanboy, but just be kind of ask them the questions that you want answers to.
I think you're definitely right. That's good. That's good instinct.
Yeah. So have you had anything like that ever happen? Not someone punching you out or anything, but like an awkward interview that you kind of felt like you had to bring it back in.
No, I don't. I can't think of that. I mean, like, there are definitely times where we have, we challenge people every day, Every day we have often tough conversations with people. And, I had to talk to Wesley Snipes about going to jail, and he didn't want to talk about it, But I knew it was important to talk about. I had to talk to him about tax evasion. There's reasons to talk about these things. And it's not comfortable, Brian. Like, it's not comfortable. And you're scared. I've talked to some of the greatest interviewers ever, and your heart rate still goes up. But there's power in asking a question like that. You're serving the listener. You're serving the people who are listening to it, and you end up, by doing the thing that you're most afraid to do, you end up getting some of like the most beautiful moments. It can be lovely. So, awkward wise, no, I haven't had too many awkward situations necessarily. I'm sure next time, by the time this goes out, like I'll probably after having like 8. but I haven't had anything too bad yet.
In the earlier part, I mentioned about Gomeshi. Now, I'm not going to get into everything with him, obviously, because I don't want anyone to lose a job here. I mentioned that I thought some people liked his interview skills, and you said there's nothing to like about Gomeshi. I just want to elaborate on that a little bit more. Why do you feel that way? Is it just because of what he did?
Yeah, of course. Okay. I think that when you treat people like that, when you do something like that, I'm not going to remember the good things. I have an option.
No, that's definitely. I agree with you, because it's like the same case with Bill Cosby. I mean, you can remember the Cosby Show, but looking at what's happened now, do you really look at that as such a great, as a great guy?
Yeah, and what do you get by acknowledging it? I mean, what are you really gaining? Unless you can kind of gain some greater perspective by acknowledging something like that. But I can't, and the guy made some of my close friends' life's a living hell, and he hurt a lot of people, and people that I know, and even people I don't know. So I don't have anything good to say about him.
Tom, you have another interest that ties into folk music. As a newfie, I totally can see why. Tell people what else you got going on.
Yeah, I'm in a band. I've been in a band for a really, really long time. It's called the Dardanelles. We play traditional Newfoundland music, and I did a lot more of it before I started hosting Q, but I love it. That's my first love is music, is performing music. That's what I did. Yeah, we still play every now and then. I'm going to go to one of their weddings. Yeah, I love them. They're my best friends, and I've made music with them, and I love collaborating with them, and I love performing with them, and occasionally we get to do it in front of people. It's great.
We've seen some great Newfoundlanders coming out of the province, Rick Mercer, Mark Critch. Do you think Newfoundland is like an untapped resource for talent in a way?
I think we're well tapped.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I don't think we're untapped at all. I think we've been tapped pretty heavily. I think that there's a lot of Newfoundlanders working in national media and comedy and performing arts and music. I think it's an amazing thing. I don't like to think too much about why it is. Generally, I find Newfoundlanders see a lot of people, regardless of status, as equals. Like Newfoundlanders are good at meeting a politician or meeting a celebrity and talking to them because they don't see any difference between them and their buddy who works at the fish. Because, Brian, there's no difference, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Newfoundlanders are great at that, right? So I think that helps you in jobs like mine where you have to talk to people, but also it helps you in the arts when you go to meet the head of a big production firm, and also Newfoundlanders have a culture of working so hard, not exclusively the only Canadian culture that has that, but they work terribly hard, and they've had to, and they come from hardworking people for the most part. When you work really, really hard and you're kind to people, Conan O'Brien said that, right? He said, if you work hard and you're kind,
amazing things will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that Newfoundlanders work really, really hard, and they can be what we call kindness is fairness and equality.
You just moved up some points on my likeness meter for quoting Conan, because
my number one, man.
I love Conan too. Finally, Tom, to close the interview out, we're going to play a game called Slam or Not a Slam, kind of a riff off of your CBC Jam or Not a Jam. So I don't know how big you are at wrestling, but Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant in WrestleMania, slam or not a slam?
Oh, 100% a slam. WrestleMania, like the first matchup, like one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time.
All right.
Like, I will watch that tonight.
I'm a big wrestling fan as well. I've actually been watching the Attitude Era the last few days. The other one I got is LeBron James going in alone on a basketball net.
Well, that's going to be a slam, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. Now, Tom...
Are we going to get a not a slam? These are all slams.
All right. Tom Power going in alone on a basketball net.
Oh, not a slam. Not a slam. That's what we call a trip.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Tom Power for coming on the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying... Look out, Tom. Tobin's coming for your job. Mwahaha. Thanks for listening, and good night.